The Shadow of the Square. Chapter 1. The Unyielding Stone. The morning it arrived, suffocating. Marcus Thorne stood on the grand but crumbling porch of the Savannah mansion, the humid Georgia air thick around him. 72 years of history. Or, more accurately, 72 years of dust, decay, and unspoken grief. This house, on one of Savannah's picturesque squares, was a monument to both beauty and heartache. And Marcus, a sharp, cynical New York lawyer, was here to dismantle it, to sell it, to finally close a chapter that to him felt more like an ancient, moldy book. His grandmother, Adeline Thorne, elegant even in her advanced age, but with eyes that held a profound, lingering sadness, sat in a wicker chair on the porch. Her gaze, distant, unwavering, was fixed on the sprawling, untamed garden. "It won't let go, Marcus," she murmured, her voice a soft, weathered whisper. "This house, it won't let go until the truth is known." Marcus sighed. This again, the family curse, the Southern mysticism. He'd heard it all before. His grandmother's unwavering belief that the old Thorne family home held the key to the disappearance of her twin sister, Lily. Vanished on their 8th birthday over 60 years ago, just gone from this very house. "Grandma," Marcus began, his voice calm, rational, "we've been over this. The police searched, the family searched. There was nothing. It was a tragedy, a terrible, inexplicable loss, but it wasn't the house." Adeline turned his gaze to him, and in her eyes he saw not just sadness, but a fierce, unyielding conviction. "You don't understand, Marcus. You never did. Lily, she's still here, somewhere. Her spirit, a trace. The house knows." He suppressed a groan. He had flown all the way from New York, leaving behind a demanding case, just to help Adeline settle her affairs, to convince her that holding onto this crumbling relic was financially irresponsible and emotionally crippling. But she was clinging to a ghost, a child's ghost. The house itself seemed to breathe around them. The scent of magnolias, sweet and cloying, mingled with the faint smell of old wood and something else, something indescribable, a presence. He dismissed it. Old house smells. "Grandma, the house needs extensive repairs. It's a drain. It's time to move on, for your sake, for your peace of mind." Adeline shook her head slowly. "Peace of mind. There can be no peace until I know what happened to my Lily. No peace until this house finally tells its story." She looked at the heavy oak front door. "It won't let me leave. Not yet." He knew arguing was futile. He had to find a way to make her see reason. Perhaps if he himself explored the house, found no hidden clues, no supernatural whispers, she would finally accept the truth that it was just a house, an old house with a painful past. He decided to start his own investigation, a logical, systematic search, not for ghosts, but for anything that might finally, conclusively, show Adeline that there was nothing left to find, and then he would list the property. Chapter 2. The Whispering Doll. The silence inside the house was oppressive. A thick, humid stillness. Marcus walked through the grand, faded rooms, the floorboards creaking beneath his expensive shoes. Sunlight, filtered through dusty, drawn curtains, painted stripes on the worn Persian rugs. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every forgotten trinket seemed to hold a story, a whisper of another time. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, were 2 identical porcelain dolls. Their painted eyes stared up at him, wide and unblinking. Adeline had told him stories of these dolls, her and Lily's favorites. Each twin had one. He picked one up. It felt strangely heavy for its size. The lace on its dress was brittle, crumbling. He noticed a faint, almost invisible seam on its back, just beneath the collar, a tiny, nearly hidden clasp. He remembered his grandmother saying his great-grandmother had made them herself, expert seamstress. Curiosity piqued. Marcus carefully, painstakingly, unlatched the clasp. The back of the doll's dress opened. Inside, nestled deep within the doll's cotton stuffing, was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper, yellowed with age, fragile. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. His lawyer's mind, trained for detail, noted the microscopic creases, the texture of the paper. It was old, very old. He unrolled it. The handwriting was small, a little shaky, childlike, but strangely determined. Father knows. Don't tell Adeline. Look where light don't reach, but path is seen. His breath hitched. Lily! It had to be Lily's handwriting. He remembered old birthday cards, tiny notes. This was it. This was her. His heart, usually a steady, rational drum, began to pound. Father knows. Daniel Thorne, his great-grandfather, a scholar, an eccentric, rumored to dabble in the occult. Adeline rarely spoke of him, but when she did, it was with a strange mix of reverence and fear. Don't tell Adeline. Why? What secret was so terrible it had to be kept from her own twin? Look where light don't reach, but path is seen. This was a clue, a riddle. Classic Lily. She had loved riddles. Marcus carefully refolded the note, placing it back inside the doll. He reclasped the seam. He looked at the other doll, identical. He gently placed them back in the box. He would tell Adeline. He had to. This was the answer she'd been waiting for. The beginning of it, at least. But then the words, "Don't tell Adeline," echoed in his mind. Why the secrecy? What if telling her now without understanding the full context caused her more pain? What if Daniel, his great-grandfather, had done something unspeakable? He had to know more. He had to follow the clue first. He had to uncover the full truth before presenting it to his already fragile grandmother. He put the box back, carefully, almost reverently. He would continue his search, alone, for now. He left the nursery, his mind reeling. The house felt different now. No longer just a dusty old building. It felt alive. Watching. Waiting. Chapter 3. The Light and the Shadow. The riddle gnawed at Marcus. Where light don't reach, but path is seen. He walked through the house, his gaze no longer casual, but forensic. He looked for hidden passages, unusual architectural features. He thought of libraries, forgotten attics, the shadowy corners of the grand drawing room. Then it hit him. The basement, the vast, sprawling, ancient basement, a place Adeline always avoided. She said it gave her the shivers. He remembered stories of it being used as a root cellar, a hiding place during storms. It was rarely, if ever, properly lit. He found the basement door, tucked away in the back of the pantry. It was heavy, made of dark, gnarled wood. It creaked open with a groan that seemed to echo through the very foundations of the house. The air was cool, damp, and smelled of earth and mildew. Darkness enveloped him. He fumbled for the light switch. It flickered weakly, casting long, dancing shadows. The basement stretched out, a labyrinth of brick arches and rough-hewn beams. Piles of forgotten furniture, trunks, and covered objects lay like sleeping giants. He pulled out his phone, its flashlight cutting a bright swath through the gloom. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning every inch of the ancient walls. He looked for anything that might suggest a path, a hidden opening, a difference in the brickwork. He walked past shelves stacked with old canning jars, past dusty wine racks. He approached the far wall where the natural light was weakest, where light don't reach. He stopped. The wall here was older. He noticed a faint, almost imperceptible line in the brickwork, a slight deviation in the mortar, and then he saw them. Faint slivers of light, thin as threads, peeking through cracks in the wall. But path is seen. Ventilation slits from the outside, almost completely overgrown, barely letting in any light, but enough to suggest an opening. He pressed his hand against the brick. It felt hollow, different. He ran his fingers along the mortar. It was oddly loose in places. He tried pushing. Nothing. He tried pulling. A faint grinding sound. He found a loose brick tucked beneath the crumbling sill. He pulled it out. Behind it, a dark space. And then he saw it. A thin, almost invisible wire running along the mortar line. A trigger mechanism? His heart pounded. He pulled gently on the wire. A soft click echoed in the vast basement. And then, with a low rumble, a section of the brick wall, cleverly disguised, swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage. He shone his flashlight into the opening. It was a small room, hidden, secret, just as the note suggested. He stepped inside. The air was still, heavy, trapped for decades. He shone his light around the tiny chamber. Dust motes danced in the beam. Chests, several of them, stacked against one wall, and in the center of the room, a small, child-sized wooden table. And on it, a doll, identical to the ones he found in the toy chest, and beside it, a collection of tiny, faded children's clothes. Drawings scattered on the table, crude but vibrant, of flowers, of trees, and of stars. Strange geometrical symbols drawn around the stars. And then his gaze fell upon it. A small, leather-bound diary resting on the table. It was old, green leather, fastened with a small, tarnished brass lock. No key. This was Lily's. It had to be. Her secret world, hidden away. His great-grandfather's secret. As Marcus stood there, overwhelmed by the discovery, a soft gasp came from behind him. Marcus? What in God's name? He spun around. Adeline stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. She must have heard the rumble of the wall, or simply felt drawn down here. "Grandma," he exclaimed, his voice a mix of surprise and apprehension. He hadn't wanted her to find out like this. Her gaze swept over the hidden room, the chests, the tiny table, the drawings, and then her eyes landed on the green leather diary. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "My Lily!" She stumbled forward, her hand reaching out, trembling for the diary. Marcus caught her, supporting her. "Grandma, I found a note inside Lily's doll. It led me here. It said, 'Don't tell Adeline.'" He held up the doll. Adeline stared at the doll, then back at the room. "Daniel," she breathed, her voice filled with a sudden chilling realization. "My father, he always kept secrets. He always had his peculiar interests." Her voice trailed off, a profound sadness settling over her. "He knew," she said, her voice stronger now, but laced with pain. "He knew what happened to her. All this time, he kept it hidden." Marcus nodded, his own heart heavy. The truth was beginning to reveal itself, and it was darker than he had imagined. Chapter 4. The Bloom and the Key. Adeline sat on a dusty crate in the hidden room, cradling the green leather diary. Her fingers traced the tarnished lock. He always kept a small brass key. He called it his key to knowledge. He never let us touch it. A distant memory. A child's frustration at forbidden things. "We need to find that key," Marcus said, his lawyer's mind already working. "It has to be here."
Or he left a clue. They searched the room. The chests held Lily's childhood clothes, her favorite storybooks, more drawings, all untouched, preserved in the dry, still air of the hidden chamber. It was like a time capsule, a heartbreaking testament to a life abruptly interrupted. No key. Adeline stood, her gaze sweeping over the simple drawings on the walls, stars, constellations, and those strange symbols, repeated again and again. Not childlike scribbles. These were deliberate, almost ritualistic. "He was obsessed with the stars," Adeline mused, her voice distant. "My father, Daniel, he believed they held ancient secrets. He would spend hours in his study, poring over old books, charts. He called it celestial navigation of the soul." Marcus remembered the stories. His great-grandfather, the recluse, the scholar who shunned society for his arcane studies. Suddenly, Adeline's eyes lit up. "The family Bible!" she exclaimed. "It was always on his desk. He said it was the true atlas of existence. He always kept things in it, pressed flowers, old letters. He said it was his private archive." They hurried upstairs to Daniel's old study. It was a room filled with towering bookshelves, dense with ancient leather-bound tomes. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten wisdom. The family Bible sat on a high shelf, a massive, imposing volume. Adeline reached for it, her fingers trembling. She pulled it down. The leather was worn smooth with age. She opened it carefully. Pages rustled. Her gaze skimmed over the familiar verses. Then she paused. Tucked within the delicate, tissue-thin pages of the Genesis chapter, a single dried flower, pressed flat, a small, 5-petaled white bloom. "A star jasmine," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Lily's favorite. She used to pick them for father." Beneath the fragile, paper-thin petals of the dried flower, a faint glint of brass. The key, small, ornate, tarnished with time. Adeline carefully lifted the flower, revealing the key. It was the same one she remembered, the key to knowledge. She held it in her palm, a fragile bridge between the past and the present. She walked back to the hidden room in the basement, Marcus following her. The air in the secret chamber felt thick with anticipation. She knelt beside the small table, the green leather diary clutched in her hand. With a deep breath, she inserted the key into the lock. It clicked, softly, resonantly. A sound that echoed through 60 years of silence. She opened the diary. The pages were filled with Lily's familiar, childlike handwriting, simple sentences, innocent observations about the garden, about their dolls, about Adeline. But then, as she turned the pages, the tone shifted. The entries became more frequent, more urgent. The words grew larger, more erratic. And the drawings, the stars, the symbols, they became more prominent, more detailed. Lily was writing about her father, about his special games, his secret lessons. He told her she was chosen, she was unique, she was brave. He was teaching her how to travel to the stars, how to walk between worlds. Adeline read, her face growing paler with each word. Marcus stood beside her, reading over her shoulder, his jaw tight. "Father says I'm brave,
One entry read, "He says the stars are a door, and I can open it. He draws me pictures. He says the symbols are the way, like a map." Another entry, later, more desperate. "Father is different now. His eyes are bright, too bright. He says I must go soon, for my safety, from the shadows that will come." And then a final chilling entry, dated the very day of their 8th birthday, the day she vanished. "Father says it's time, the special game. He said it will be a dream, and I will come back. He is showing me the light. It glows like the stars. Adeline, I'm scared, but Father says it's for us, to protect us."
The last words were scrawled, almost illegible. "He says goodbye for now. Tell Adeline not to cry. I will see her again, soon, I hope." And beneath it, a tiny folded piece of paper. A letter, addressed to Adeline. Chapter 5. The Portal and the Promise. Adeline's hands trembled as she unfolded the small letter. It was written in Lily's childlike hand, but the words carried a weight far beyond her years. "My dearest Adeline, if you are reading this, I'm gone. Father says it's a special journey, a game. He says I'm brave, and I have to help him protect us from the shadows. He says it's for our family. He took me to the secret room. He drew the symbols on the wall. They glowed. He held a crystal, and it hummed. He told me it would feel like falling into a warm dream. He said I would come back when it's safe. I'm a little scared, Adeline. The light is so bright. It feels like my insides are buzzing. Father said not to tell you because you would worry, but I didn't want you to think I just left. I love you, Addie, so much. You're my best friend. Please don't blame yourself. It wasn't your fault. Father said it was his duty, his knowledge. I hope I see you again soon. I really do. Remember our secret handshake and our dolls? Always remember me, Addie. Always. Your loving twin, Lily. Adeline finished reading. The letter fluttered from her numb fingers, landing softly on the dusty table. A sob, deep and gut-wrenching, ripped from her throat. 60 years. 60 years of searching, of guilt, of wondering if she had somehow failed her sister. And the truth, it was far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Her father, Daniel, he hadn't just been eccentric. He had been obsessed, deluded. He had sent his own child, his innocent daughter, into another dimension? A portal? It was madness. Pure, unadulterated madness. Marcus, his face pale, knelt beside her, gathering the scattered pages of the diary, the letter. He put a comforting arm around her shoulders. Grandma, I am so sorry. Adeline wept, tears of grief, of anger, of profound sorrow, but also, slowly, tears of understanding. And perhaps a sliver of peace. Lily hadn't just vanished. She hadn't been taken by a stranger. She had been sacrificed by her own father in his twisted pursuit of forbidden knowledge. But she had gone, believing it was a game, believing she was protecting her family, believing she would return. Marcus looked at the symbols on the wall. He recognized some of them. Obscure alchemical symbols, astrological charts. He had seen them in ancient texts, in rare book collections. This wasn't just a madman's ramblings. This was a sophisticated, if terrifying, attempt to manipulate forces unknown.
He was trying to open a portal, Marcus murmured, his voice hushed, eyes wide with a dawning horror. He believed he could send her somewhere. To protect her, or perhaps to prove his theories. Adeline looked at the symbols through her tear-blurred eyes. He talked about the threshold, the veil. He said the Thorne family line had a unique sensitivity to it, a connection. That's why he chose this house, this land. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The cynicism, the rationality that had always been his shield, crumbled. He had scoffed at Adeline's mysticism. He had dismissed Savannah's whispers. But here, in this hidden room, the impossible had become terrifyingly real. He looked at the dusty ancient chests. He opened one, more of Daniel's journals, far older, filled with the same symbols, the same obsession. Not just Daniel, generations, the Thorne family. This wasn't just one man's madness. It was a dark, hidden legacy, a dangerous occult tradition woven into the very fabric of their ancestry. The house. It wouldn't let go. Not because of Lily's ghost, but because of the unfulfilled promise, the incomplete experiment, the lingering energy of a portal once opened.
Adeline slowly composed herself. Her tears subsided, leaving her face streaked but resolute. "She was brave," Adeline whispered, clutching the letter to her chest. "My sweet Lily, so brave, and I blamed myself for so long." The guilt, a lifelong burden, finally lifted, replaced by a profound, if painful, clarity. Marcus made a decision. He wasn't leaving. Not now. Not when the truth, however horrifying, was finally within reach. He had to help Adeline. He had to understand the extent of his family's dark heritage. He had to close this chapter, not by selling the house, but by understanding its true, terrifying secret. Chapter 6. The Unseen Threshold. The days that followed were a blur of intense research and emotional processing. Marcus, the pragmatic lawyer, immersed himself in Daniel Thorne's journals. The esoteric symbols, the cryptic references to celestial alignments, ley lines, and ancient texts. He discovered a hidden compartment in Daniel's main study, containing more of his great-grandfather's private library. Books on Hermeticism, Kabbalah, ancient Egyptian rituals, and interdimensional travel. It was a chilling testament to Daniel's obsession. Adeline, meanwhile, found a fragile yet profound peace. The agonizing guilt was gone. The constant gnawing question of Lily's fate had an answer, however unbelievable. She could finally grieve, truly grieve, for the sister lost not to mere disappearance, but to a father's hubris and a terrifying hidden quest. Marcus discovered that the symbols Lily had drawn were not random. They were simplified versions of a complex sigil found repeatedly in Daniel's later journals, a sigil he called the gateway key. Daniel believed that certain locations, at certain astrological alignments, could be used to open thresholds to other realities. And this house, built on a specific ley line intersection in Savannah, was supposedly one such nexus. The chilling implication, Daniel had been planning this for years. He hadn't just stumbled upon the idea, he had systematically prepared. He had chosen Lily. Her innocence, her unique connection as a twin, her bright spirit, he had seen it as a potent catalyst. Marcus, now fully invested, felt a strange sense of responsibility. He couldn't dismiss this as madness, not after finding the evidence, the dolls, the letters, the hidden room, and the profound shift in Adeline. There was something real, something ancient at play here. One evening, as the Savannah twilight deepened, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, Marcus and Adeline sat in the hidden room.
The air felt heavy, charged. He thought he was saving her, Adeline whispered, her tears soft. Saving her from a future he foresaw, a future of chaos. He truly believed he was doing something noble. Marcus nodded. The journals suggest a deep paranoia, Grandma. A belief that a coming cataclysm could only be averted by sending a pure soul to a sanctuary beyond. He believed he was chosen to protect the Thorn lineage, not just physically, but spiritually. And Lily, she trusted him, Adeline said, her eyes fixed on the empty space where her sister once stood. She loved him. A deep, abiding sadness settled over her face. Marcus continued to sift through Daniel's final, most manic entry. He found a final, desperate entry written just before Lily's disappearance. It described the preparations, the specific crystal Daniel had used, the ritual words, the moment of activation, and then a series of frantic, almost illegible lines about the tremendous energy, the unforeseen consequences, and a chilling realization. The gateway is not a one-way path. It is a fragile equilibrium. Once opened, it can never truly close. And its echoes, they linger. They bind. A cold dread seeped into Marcus's bones. The house, its inability to let go, it wasn't just a figure of speech. The portal, once opened, might still be subtly connected. A lingering resonance, binding Lily in some unseen way to this place, binding the Thorn family to its dark secret. He looked at Adeline, her face, etched with a newfound serenity despite the profound grief, was a testament to her strength. She had finally found her truth. But what about him? He, the rationalist, the disbeliever, was now faced with the inexplicable. His world had shifted on its axis. He realized that selling the house wouldn't solve anything. The secret, the echoes, the binding connection, they were part of the Thorn legacy, a burden, and perhaps a destiny. He reached out, taking Adeline's hand. "Grandma," he said, his voice firm, "I'm not selling this house. Not now. We need to understand this. We need to honor Lily's memory, and we need to ensure that whatever Father Daniel did, it doesn't harm anyone else." Adeline squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you." Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of generations. "The house, it won't let us go until its story's fully told, until its purpose is fulfilled." Marcus looked around the hidden room. The ancient symbols, the faded drawings of stars, the memory of a child's laughter echoing across 60 years through a doorway to another world. The house was not merely stone and timber. It was a living testament to a profound, tragic, and utterly inexplicable family history, a history that, for the first time, Marcus was ready to truly face. The shadow of the square now held a chilling new depth, and the promise of further unsettling revelations. The journey was far from over. It had just begun.